Welcome to Faith into Action podcast. Thanks for joining us today as we navigate faith and our journey with our biblical worldview in today's culture. If you enjoy our podcast, please be sure to like the video, leave comments, and subscribe to our channel. There are links on the YouTube homepage to our social media accounts on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, where you can find more content. If you find this inspiring in any way, please share with at least one friend. We are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. Just search Faith into Action Podcast. Now let's join Eric and Jerry in their discussion for this week.
All right, welcome back. So we actually got a podcast uploaded last week as we continue to struggle with some of the technology issues, I guess. But I know the video wasn't very good, but the audio was pretty good. So and we are now on Apple and Spotify, so you can watch or you can listen to it without having to watch the video.
Maybe you should just listen to that one.
Yeah, that one was probably better just being listened to. So we'll see how this turns out today. Trying to watch it as it records and see if it's buffering or if it's actually uploading pretty well, and it looks like it's doing pretty well so far. So that's good. So we'll kick off from here. I know last week after we shut off the camera, me and you had some conversation post podcast or post streaming. We were talking about what's upcoming throughout the month, and
nothing big this month.
No, nothing I know of. January 20th, I think is the day.
January 20th.
That nothing happens.
That's not. Yeah, nothing important day.
So reality is the inauguration of Donald Trump will happen on January 20th. So, there's going to be a lot of feelings that day, and all in the time leading up to it. To be honest, I don't want to say fear. I guess I grieve the possibilities of what people may lash out and do in response.
Right. And those consequences on the people.
Yes.
On people around them. Always the shrapnel. Always the afterblow.
The innocents that are caught in the crossfire of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I grieve the possibilities of that. I think people are very short-minded or short-sighted in their actions a lot of times, and I think there is a high possibility we see more of that over the next several weeks. But our hope doesn't lie in any of the government institutions. We know that our hope lies much higher than that. So I think that's where us as Christians need to keep our minds set as we move through the next month, where there will be a lot of narrative on each side of the fence, whether it's pro-Trump or anti-Trump. There will be a lot of narrative, and we need to sort through that. And, Pastor was talking about this past week, discernment, and this is where some of our discernment of what the truth is and where our hearts need to lay, we need to keep that in mind.
Reality in something like this, from a presidential standpoint, is we're all going to live through, hopefully, right? I can't promise that, I guess, but we all majority live through presidents we like and we don't like. I mean, at least in my lifetime, for instance, I voted for Democrats and Republicans in terms of what they're classified as on the ballot. And I've not liked choices that the majority has made on both sides.
Right.
But don't lose your witness and lose your control over something like this. I get it. It is important. It is important, 100%. But it's nothing to put yourself in harm. Worst case scenario is to harm somebody else. So weird about those violent things that we hope that don't happen. It's usually never the people committing them that are actually the ones that are getting hurt. It's usually the innocent people there. Um, Again, I'm presuming, I have no reason to think they wouldn't be innocent people, but just projecting their side or of disagreement, probably legally, regularly, just being there, just being participants.
Mm-hmm.
You go back to the guy, that was uh, the bystander tragically killed at the Trump's assassination.
Trying
That
to protect his family.
that guy was just there, man.
Yep.
That those people, and that guy could have been any of those people in the crowd, but that bullet goes until it stops. And likely even if it had hit President-elect Trump, or President Trump, if you want to call him that now, it's still likely it would have caused damage to people behind him. So it's just those people weren't there to not go home that day. People and even and they were there in this moment together, and likewise in other movements with the in years past, we saw all the rioting and stuff. There's people that lost their lives that were just there to protest, and I find nothing generally wrong with peaceful protest. Of course, you got to raise your voice and you got to hand signs. I mean, you don't just show up and be quiet. I get it, but setting off things, nonviolent. There we go.
Nonviolent protesting.
I mean, protesting to me is a fundamental political right given to this country.
First Amendment.
Right.
I mean, we're given that in the First Amendment. And when you look historically at the growth of America in the last 60, 70 years, protesting has made a lot of positive changes. But when you get into the violent protesting, that's where the issue lies.
Won't get all the ins and outs financially, but there's a severe ignorance of these people on both sides. We're not even painting a side picture here. We're not even into beliefs yet, but a grave, vast ignorance with these people about what they're doing and the repercussions it has to people, to businesses, to the general morale of the country, but most importantly, the lives in general. And when we talked about in the very first episode, the things we can control in that instance is we can be super duper mad, and you be upset and just so angry. I get it, me too, right? I have been, but to carry something out, let that overpower you. You have no forethought of what the consequences of what do they call it, the impact zone of your action.
Yeah,
it never generally stops just where it happened. I mean, it's like the concussion of the boom, right? You have the explosion, then you have the concussion. You just got to think outside yourself. It's so selfish, it's so ignorant for violent activity, and we're praying that both sides, I would say, act like adults, but that's not even a valid term anymore because most of these are adults, but they're acting like kids. That you keep it to a peaceful protest, and let your thoughts be known, let your opinions and perspectives be known, but like don't lift your hand.
When we were talking off camera last week, I think we came to the agreement that reality is whatever side you stand on, the vast majority of things that directly affect you and concern you, both sides probably see things pretty similar.
Yeah.
You want affordability of life. You want your kids to get a good education. You want to be safe. Those are all things that are fundamental.
Good schools, low insurance, good health care. You want to be able to bring money home. Most people want to have things, just personal items above just barely getting by. I mean, nothing wrong with that. You work hard. You should like to work hard and play hard. And
that's fundamental responsibilities that the government plays a pretty dramatic role in the average everyday life of Americans. So I think it's important for us to remember all of our similarities, no matter whatever political stance you have. But remember the similarities first. Let's come to agreement on those,
Hmm.
and then we can worry about the other things. Whether you consider the other things major or minor, it doesn't matter whether how big of an issue you think it is. The let's get together on the things we agree on, and then we can start pulling in the things that we don't agree on, and come to compromise and come to agreement. And I guess from a secular standpoint, come to a compromise. I don't think we should compromise our beliefs or our faith, but at least hear each other out in a reasonable tone.
Right.
I think it's rather than just being divided so quickly and fanatical on either side. And it just doesn't matter if you can be the most conservative person. And it does to you. It doesn't matter whatever a progressive person says. As soon as they open their mouth, you're already thinking that they're lying and they're wrong. And rather than saying, "Hey, let me hear you out.
Sure.
What do you got to say?" And
We
then
also
hear
talked
me
about
out.
what's wrong with hearing a side you disagree with. That's either going to sharpen you and soften your heart to maybe some sort of understanding. I'm not even saying full agreement. I'm just saying somewhat understanding based on their path of life where they've reached that.
Hmm.
But it also might just sharp you more. You might give you a firmer stance. There's don't be. We talked about the isolation thing for the first couple of times. We're not to be isolated from people. We should let the Holy Spirit insulate us, and we should be going out into a world that we know that. And I'm speaking as a Christian that is to a world that is countercultural to what we believe. And my argument, my plea today is remember who you are when January 20th and actually every day, but remember who you are and how you're supposed to act if you believe in Jesus Christ. You know, so to put that.
What is it? 1 John 1. He is in me. I am in him because he is in me. And that's not verbatim. I probably butchered that verse, but we need to remember that. Like, act as if act as if Jesus is in you. Don't act act out.
Right.
Act godly.
And once again, if you want to know how to do that, read some Jesus. You know what I mean?
Spend some time in the
Spend
Word.
some time in the Word. Read how Jesus approached these things. Read how Jesus did with these things. And the biggest issue is to put it in a spiritual context. Like Jesus wasn't Democrat or Republican.
No.
Jesus was Jesus. He claimed even up to his crucifixion, right, with Pilate. He's like, my kingdom's not of this world. Otherwise, I would call down angels and wipe everybody out, right?
Yeah.
And that's why he tells us, I believe in Romans 13, to respect our leaders and pray for them because they are commissioned by Jesus. Now that's a tough pill to swallow because if they're bad, they're still put there,
Right.
still allowed to be there. But we get back we kind of get bent out of shape. About that everything he does is supposed to be to our 100% benefit. Well, to our liking, which
or
it is.
To our agreement is
to
what
our
I was
agreement.
going
There
to
we
say.
go.
We get caught up in about us, and it's not always about us. He has a bigger vision at hand that we don't see.
For sure.
I was thinking about, Trump is probably arguably one of the most, if not the most controversial president in the history of the U.S., at least in the top 5, I would say.
Top
Easily.
5. That's generous.
If not the top 1. But everybody's going to have feelings about him personally. And when you think about from the Christian standpoint, there will be Christians that are Democrat and Christians that are Republicans. Some of them that voted for Trump and some of them that didn't. So there'll be times when people will look and say, I don't see how God could how God could use him. But I just want to argue the point that when you look back through Scripture, the people that God used, and they weren't all
Great.
front put pew Christians. So there was definitely some opportunity there. The couple of that come to mind, like in the Bible, of people he used that were definitely not great role models. You think of Rahab, the prostitute. You think of David. I mean, murderer, adulterer. Matthew, a disciple, was a tax collector who normally the rule of thumb in those days they stole from the taxes.
Mhm.
And Paul was a murderer. There's times and times over that he uses people that you and I would deem not worthy, but he sees something through them that he can use them. And I think as we move forward, whether it's for Donald Trump or 4 years from now, it's another president that is coming to office, I think all Christians need to unite and pray that he uses the president for God's good.
Right. That's what's supposed to happen. What and and keep in mind anybody, man or woman, that they are people, and your faith first should be in Jesus, right?
Right.
And don't treat whatever president, any president, like they're the Messiah. They're absolutely not.
I love that you brought that up because one of the verses that I was looking at as I was thinking about our conversation today. I know me and you had a little bit of conversation over the last 3 or 4 days.
Mm.
But one of the things that come to mind, like, it doesn't matter Donald Trump or the next president or 20 years from now or 50 years from now, they are not the Messiah. And David reminds us in Psalms 118, verses 8 and 9, it's better to trust in the Lord than to put your confidence in man.
Mm.
It's better to put your trust in the Lord than put your confidence in princes. And, we too often we fall into this nature of putting our trust in the government or some human authoritative figure, that we put trust in them rather than putting our trust that God is going to work it
Yeah.
for his good.
I always come back to the leaders murdered Jesus.
Right.
I come back to that point, and here we are yet again. It's almost like we're crying out for that king, right? Like I never meant for you to be ruled by a king, but yet we asked for it. And guess what we got?
Yeah,
We got a fallen man, fallen. Even in their good spots, they were still fallen men. They still did very questionable things all the way through the
when you
kings.
look through all of that, through
And
the judges and kings and everything, there was a lot of fallen people that.
and here's where we are again.
Yeah.
Oh, we need and we're doing that with our president. We do that with our president. We uh, put he or she on a pedestal like they're going by themselves create an environment that's so pleasing and well for everyone. But I'm just saying I cautious people of that because that's never happened, and even I keep coming back to that murder thing. Like the religious leaders killed Jesus. He threatened. He didn't literally threaten it. But he threatened their
Authority.
Yeah.
And I think no leader is going to fix it for everybody. No human leader, because what you deem as fixed versus me may differ. So there's no way you're going to please everybody. But I think too much we're getting caught up. A lot of Christians voted for Trump, right? I mean, a lot of conservative Christians voted for Trump, at least. I think we get caught up in the fact that we think, or some people think, I'm not going to say I do or you, but some people think that we're going to wake up on January 21st and everybody's going to be outside of the churches holding hands and singing Amazing Grace. That somehow, we inaugurate a new president and it's just going to fix everything. And
Right.
rather than praying about the true faults of our country and praying about the heart change of our country, we pray about some person coming to be a quote unquote Messiah for us and fix it all, rather than looking inward and say, hey, I'm going to fix it in me and I'm going to fix it around my kitchen table. And then we can go out.
There we go. There's going to be this harmonious tone that's just going to be in the air that we're going to breathe in and ingest and all be happy and unified. Obviously not, but like that idea that you talked, and I know that was sarcastical in a way, but because it's so not possible, but it's it's anti-biblical to think that we as Christians are going to wake up one day and be accepted into the world. Hey, that's not our destination, and that's not biblical at all.
We are told time and time again in the New Testament that it's not going to happen, and Jesus tells us that.
If we are to be, let's go back to next week, boldly walk in 2025, and in the truth, we are going to be countercultural. Period.
There will be divide between us and the world. There should be divide.
There should be. I'm trying to think, and again, we're always open for correction or a different thought strategy, but I don't see anywhere in the Bible that this side of Jesus, that there's going to be harmony between Christians and culture.
100%.
And the only reason I don't say Christian culture is we're not culture. We're a life. We're living in truth. It's not that something that can be changed and morphed and evolve. Now our maturity inside that might evolve, but there's not, the truth doesn't look like this. The way the truth, like you said it to me. Now again, leave it open if somebody is able to reconcile that. But the context of what I'm saying is I don't see a wavelength with Jesus. I see I'm either with, above, or below. That's the way I see it. That's the way I see. And a lot of times I'm hanging. I get it. And I'm failing, and I'm not ever getting above. I guess is what I'm saying. But I'm at a high for a moment.
Sometimes we get a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I say high, not there yet. Yeah. Still at the bottom. But we just put too much faith in these people. It's okay to have faith, but we just expect a little more out of them than we would get up there and be all righteous and mighty. It's not a winning summation.
That job, I've thought about it before. That job is like working baggage claim. Nobody's ever going to tell you, "Hey, you did a great job. You've done the absolute best that you could have done. We appreciate all your hard work and effort." Nobody ever shows up at the airport, stops by baggage claim, like, "Hey, man, I just want to tell you, thank you for getting my bags to the airport today."
Right.
It's nothing but complaints.
You tip the guy that brings them to your car, but the guy that got them there, like, "Hey, man."
Yeah. So that job is a pretty unfulfilling job. In reality, I mean, there's probably going to be a lot of things that you're like, man, I really did some good stuff here, or I really did some good stuff there, but you don't get a lot of accolades, especially from kind of the legacy media standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
They're gonna poke holes in everything you do. So it's not a gratifying job, but I think us as Christians, we need to pray for those leaders.
That's biblical.
And you had a scripture we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? Romans?
Romans 13. I'll pull it up here on my trusty little small laptop, aka my phone. May I read?
Mhm.
Roman start off says the Christian. It's in the little subtitle, so it says the Christian's duties to the state. It said, "Let everyone submit to the governing authorities, since there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are instituted by God." Doesn't really say for our benefit, well, it is for our benefit, but we might not think so. But it says, "So then, the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will be judged, will bring judgment on themselves." Um, I don't want to read. Well, I mean, I do want to read all 13 verses, but I won't for time. But I'll skip down to 5, and it says, "Therefore you must submit, not only because of the wrath, but also because of your conscience. For the reason you pay taxes, since authorities are God's servants, continually attending to these tasks. Pay your obligations to everyone. Taxes to those you owe taxes. Tolls to those you owe tolls. Respect to those who owe respect. And honor those you owe honor." I get it. I get it, people. It's tough. They don't seem very honorable. They don't seem very loyal to us as their constituents. But sometimes you just got to be obedient.
And,
Sometimes you just got to be obedient.
and I'll say this, it's from a conservative standpoint, because that's me coming from a conservative standpoint. It's easy for us to talk about that now because we got a conservative president about praying for him. It gets a lot harder whenever it's somebody that probably differs from your view and you don't agree with. It's hard to say those prayers for people that you're not rallying behind. But those people need your prayers just as much. Those leaders, whether it's we're talking about the president, but I mean, there's so many leaders in our government, from your city mayor all the way up. There's so many leaders in government, and they don't, no matter who you are, I don't think anybody will be in a place where they say everybody that is above me in a political standpoint, from mayor to senator to Congress, all the way up, governor, everything, lieutenant governor, all the way to president, all of them align with your view. But you should pray for them all equally.
But we're not. First of all, it's tough. It's tough in a way when you put politics into trying to make politics biblical, because there's always been politics, always been sides, or religious sides and reigning sides and different things. But we got to remember. I feel like you talked about we have so much common ground, like, but the political divide, and that's what they call it now. I think the great divide is because we won't listen to what we have in common, which you said if we did, right?
Right.
That we have to concentrate on how so far apart we are. And I think that's a terrible way to be. I mean, I had a good friend, and I knew his heart, but, he made the comment out loud the other day. He's like, because there was some context to it, some before and after, but we got into the conversation, and it's because Democrats want to murder babies. And I'm like, that's all I could say. It came out so quick I didn't even think about it. I'm like, no, 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 no. Don't go there. Don't go there. Don't go there. I know a lot of good Democrats. I've voted for Democrats in the past. I know, and I voted for Republicans in the past, and some Republicans I wouldn't vote for again. Some Democrats I wouldn't either. Point being is, I know they're decent people. Like they've lived life with me. They're decent people that are Democrats, and I know they don't kill babies.
That's
You know what I mean?
That's that painted view that we are socially and culturally taught, that Democrats kill babies and Republicans are racist.
Right.
I mean, that's what we are basically taught from a social standpoint. And
because you only allow us to have two choices.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think that's a great characteristic of either party. But you got to, if you're only giving us two choices, and the entire spectrum of each party still reverts back to only one choice. And don't say the extreme left and the alt right. That doesn't do it for me. I mean, there should be way more specialized. But to your point, and I think to my point, I think the majority of us can be can find a lot of biblical structure into our politics. But guess what? It's not going to be all Republican. It's not going to be all Democrat, conservative, or liberal. I think you're going to see that both sides, in their original means, have a good medium ground and good principles. But the problem is we've stretched so far outside of those, and that's the only points we can talk about, because the further we get apart, the further divided we are, which means you need for a big right and a big left to sustain each other.
What- And I think that's a lot of the spark when you get into this. I guess the violent reactions is because you've created such a fanatical view of each side that you think that you are coaxed into believing that the other side is just evil. Whatever side you're on, you think
Right.
the other side is just pure evil. And then it creates this hostility. And it sparks the violence sometimes.
I think there are demonic forces. Call it what you will. I'm going to call it demonic forces that are on both sides of the politics, that absolutely loves and is working in cohorts with together. Obviously, they're unified in their means, but they penetrated both parties to keep us thinking like that, to keep us off the conscious mind of good people on both sides, good meanings on both sides, good values on both sides. So instead of improving those good values with each other, we're concentrated on the extremeness of both parties. That fight, that contention, that hate, which just fuels. It's like adding fuel to that fire and further separating us. We're never hardly able to get to a point of conversation at all. They say debates. It's never a debate. Nobody's actually breaking down one point, their solution, without. Um, it's usually a monologue based on how bad the other guy was at it, not how they're going to. And that's Trump too. That's everybody.
It's every
Everybody.
debate I've seen.
Every debate I've seen is never about fixing anything. It's just how bad the other person did at it. And I'm like, if that's all you did, I mean, you should have a plan. If it's important to you. If you don't, just say, hey, that's not something I'm working on right now. I can even respect that more than.
Yeah.
I don't need to know how bad the other guy did it because I lived it. I
Right.
saw it. Like, what are you going to do to improve it, or what would you do better? And why does all their idea have to be wrong? Maybe it is all wrong, but I'm saying hypothetically, what anything good about the idea that you can make better? But it's never allowed.
It
Never allowed.
Yeah.
I say allowed, but we go on with it.
It's never encouraged.
Never
either.
encouraged, but we go along. We just flow those lines happily, and then we get destructive. Both sides get destructive and mean when God tells us to love the Lord our God, and love our neighbor. Again, I just find nothing. I find it anti-biblical, our behavior inside of politics. And some people want those completely things separated. I'm like, I don't live my life separated. I don't want to live any part of my life separated from God. So you know what I mean? So for me, I have to align myself spiritually in my politics.
I love that you said that, because when you talk about like living your life separated from God in any aspect, I can't remember where I read this, but it was a description about talking about hell and what is hell, and we get this Dante's Inferno image in our mind that you see Satan sitting up on this big fiery throne and there's just fire everywhere and lava or whatever. You get this image, but I don't know what hell looks like, but what hell is is the eternal separation from God.
Mhm.
So when you think about, I don't want any part of my life without God in it, because that part of my life, whatever it is, will be hell.
I screw it up. It's screwed up.
It'll
It's
be
messed
hell
up. Yeah,
because
it'll be hell.
it's separated from God. And so it's not going to be good. And I think we need to pray more for God to be in our politics, in our culture, in our homes, in ourselves, whatever it is. I know we've talked a lot about men over the last several weeks, but I mean, like, if you're a guy and you have a wife and kids, like, start with the heart change in your house.
Mm-hmm.
Leave the bigger fish to fry for God to take care of. He'll take care of that. You start with what you can control.
Control with your house.
Start with what
I
you
like
can
it.
control rather than worrying about what bills and things they're going to pass in Congress. Because I'll be honest, if you ever tried to read an article or a bill of legislation,
They're not meant to be read, which is weird.
I mean, I broke down the amendment to Article 9 and read the whole thing 6 months, a year ago. And I probably comprehended less than 50% of what they were talking
Right.
about. So rather than us worrying about like what we can't control or we don't understand, if we controlled our house in our spiritual journey, what effect would our house have on our friends, our coworkers, our colleagues, our neighbors, our kids? What effect would they have on their friends? And would that not spread like wildfire? Would that not be a national revival if every quote unquote Christian man started it with himself in his house?
I think it would be.
I think it would be a tidal wave of movement across our country.
Mm-hmm.
But we're too caught up in what football game is this weekend, or what is going on at work, to stop and pray with our family. Just say, hey, this is going on, and we don't know how to feel about it. We're worried about it, but we're putting our trust in you.
Ask yourself, I just thought of this. If there was a third party, and let's just say for laughs and giggles here, some chuckles, say we called it the Christian party, what would that party look like? And that's more rhetorical in the sense of if you find yourself, and I'm asking everybody to think of that, create your own party, call it the Christian party. And my summation is, if you really spent your time and got outside your bias box, wherever you're at, and looked what your principles, your duties, your goals would be, you wouldn't see a red you wouldn't see a solid red, you wouldn't see a solid blue line of core principles, right?
Right.
We can get in some of those different principles when we talk specifically. We talked
We'll
about
get
bringing
into
some
those,
hard
yeah.
stuff, yeah. But it would be the best of both worlds without all the junk. It's what I think, because I know a lot of good people on both sides.
Kind of filter it out.
Yeah, and as a conservative, see, I don't even like saying, like how you said conservative, I don't even like saying Republican or Democrat. I'm just conservative by nature, by operation. And that doesn't mean if you're not that you're wrong. It just means by naturally, I just kind of operate conservatively. And I I don't want to be associated with so much of the junk in the Republican Party. But at the same time, you've only given me two choices, right? But if you were to create your own party, it was a Christian party. What are your goals? What is your platform going to look like? And if you don't have a little bit of that, a little bit of both sides in it, I think you haven't got outside yourself yet and looked in. Now, it's not going to be way over here. It's definitely not going to be way over here. But I'm talking about that core line. And if
There's good ideas on
and if
both
Christian
sides.
Democrats and I'm saying true Christian Democrats and true Christian Republicans came together and that was your party, you have to bring some of their ideas. You have to bring art. And I think they're both great ideas on. You know, I think Jesus said in there, "Thou shalt not be Democrat. Thou shalt not be a Republican." I mean, like
Right.
some of those things wouldn't explicit.
So who gets the Christian Party nomination?
No. Well, here's the thing: it wouldn't be Trump, wouldn't be Kamala.
It wouldn't be.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know, and I don't know how far back it would go to before you could get to somebody, if you could get to somebody at all. You know what I mean? I don't know because they all. It's weird. All the presidents seem to be Christians, or in some form of
Quote
Christian,
unquote, yes, yeah.
But they never talk about God.
They all claim to be Christian, but never talk about beliefs.
Yeah, and don't refer to God necessarily personally, like it. And Mr. Trump, I get it. I would say he's fairly friendly to Christians. He doesn't seem threatened by Christians, but that's a big support of his beliefs. So maybe that's there. But I've yet to really talk to him about or hear anything from him about potentially what God's done in his life.
Maybe we need to reach out to the White House if he can join us.
I'm gonna call DJT. That's what I call him. I'm gonna call DJ, and
he could open up to us about
and open up to us about it. But I'm serious though.
Yeah.
Like I question. And I think it's legitimately questioned. If you and most of them have been Catholic, I think. It's weird. A lot of politicians seem to have high Catholic backgrounds.
Right.
Hey, where do you go to mass at? Do you I'm wondering, Mr. Trump, where do you hear your sermons from? You know what I mean? If you are, or Kamala, or Biden, Trump before that, and he was, I said Biden, my bad, Biden. You know what I mean? So forth.
And I think a lot of that, and this is pure speculation, but I think a lot of that comes from most of these presidential candidates come from larger cities, and there's usually a higher concentration of Catholicism in higher population.
Yeah. Okay.
So I can kind of see that aligning with that because they are probably not from Murfreesboro,
What?
But they're not from small rural towns in general, or they may be from birth, but once they've hit adulthood, they've kind of navigated their way through larger.
I want to know who's pastoring to them right now. This is I'm telling you, it's still got to be the hardest job on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
On the earth, who's sowing into you right now? Who if you do carry this belief, and again, if they didn't, I just assume they say that. But if they say they do, and they refer to God, I would like to know. Well, how are you getting your God feel this week? Nobody would ever ask that question. Why do we not care? Why is it not asked? Well, you say you're a Catholic. Well, who's your father? Who's your spiritual leader right now? I mean, obviously, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Who's your earthly spiritual leader right now? Who is sowing scripture into you and offering?
Who's building you?
Who's building you right now?
Or holding you accountable? That direct accountability from a pastor.
I don't know. Those are all questions that I don't know. Oddly important to me, but not necessarily to most people.
And I mean, even from a Christian standpoint, I think what we need to be praying for is most presidents have some type of Christian pastors or something that come give them advice at times. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to be praying that these pastors are given biblical advice.
Oh, yeah.
And not, hey, I think this is what my congregation will be approving of because I run a mega church in a metropolitan city and I want to get my congregation numbers up. And so I'm saying what people want to hear. No, what you see in the Bible that aligns with that view. And giving that president, whether it's Trump over the next 4 years or it's somebody else, I think we need to be praying for them getting the right advice from pastors. And pastors
from the
not
right heart.
yeah,
Yeah.
that pastors aren't leading leading any president astray with unbiblical truth.
May I say that? Well, I will say this, but I might ruffle some feathers. Hopefully not with you, but I'll say it as like we rely way too much on our pastors. I just said it. Like we when we get to heaven or at judge let's just say at judgment day, our relationship with Jesus is going to be based on our relationship with Jesus. Not what our pastor told us, not what they preached. Now they will have, I believe, a special, well, Jesus said they will be held more accountable, but that didn't say that removed our accountability.
Right.
So listening is fine, but we need to be validating what our pastors are saying. We need to be in the Word ourselves. The only word that if we're in the Word once a week and it's only at church, you need to get back in the Word.
Right.
I love pastor at church says, "Don't listen to me. Read the Bible."
Right.
Right? Don't you can't get to heaven and say, "Well, Pastor so and so, this is what he taught." He's like, "That's not going to work." He's like, "I'm going to have my own accountability for if I lead y'all astray." But he said, at the end of the day, that's between you and Jesus. That's between me and Jesus. But it's going to be extra harsh, I would think. It does say about being in leadership.
I mean, with the availability of the Bible today, like everybody should be reading. Set aside some time. You can have it read to you on the Bible app. Just read it to you.
Morgan Freeman will read it to you.
So
He's awesome.
I mean, it's so available.
I don't know if
think
he's a
people-
Christian or not.
But what you're talking about the pastors is you can't rely on your pastor to say your prayers for you. You have to be praying and opening up that conversation. We don't do it enough. We're getting a little tight on time to wrap up today. I mean, I'm going to say a few closing thoughts and let you say your closing thoughts, but I think the closing thoughts need to be one, that we find some peace among ourselves in the church because Jesus is peace. So whether you agree with the political outcome or not, we Christians should not fight amongst each other about it. We should have some peace between ourselves with it. If you don't agree, it's okay to have a conversation with somebody, but don't be hostile about it. And if you do agree with the person that is elected and somebody comes to you in disagreement, there's a reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Shut up and listen to them and have conversation and be loving and accepting and just have conversation and don't be so radical in your beliefs that you can't hear the other side. But most of all, pray for our country and pray for the safety of our leaders and the safety of people in our country, because I grieve the fact, like I said at the beginning, that I think there will be a lot of hostility and unfortunately violent hostility over the next however long, whether it's the next few weeks, months, years. There will be a lot of violent hostility, and I grieve that. And I think we should be praying for people to have a heart change and challenge the men of saying, "Hey, let's start at our kitchen table.
Yeah,
Let's start ourselves. Let's lead." I think it's important. Every morning, I try to make sure when my girls get up and they come downstairs, I love it when the timing is when I'm got the Bibles out reading. This morning was perfect, and my 6-year-old came downstairs, and I have my Bible I read from, and then my reference Bible sitting beside me, and I'm highlighting and doing stuff. And she comes up to me and is like, ask for something. I was like, all right, well, give me a minute. Let me finish this verse, and then I'll get it for you. And then I got it for her, and I said, no, Daddy's got to finish reading his Bible and go sit back down. I think it's important for us as men to be that leader and that example in the house.
I got a good reference because my son Caleb, he's like, "What do you and Jerry talk about?" And I said, "Jesus, man." He's like, "Yeah, Jesus." So that was kind of cool today. Don't be caught. Don't be a fool. Don't be fooled. If you want to know what the Bible says about being a fool, read it. Google biblical being a fool biblically, and it tells you not to be a fool. Trust me, because I have to read that a lot. But don't be baited by the forces that want you to be a fool. Be kind, be gentle, treat people with love and respect. I feel like that's pretty biblical. But we're at a time that we can show who we are, or you can show who you're not.
Right.
And that's really the same thing. It's your same response. You're just going to show who you are to be true, or who you say you are to be false. Don't be one of those people. We can't control everybody, but be the Christian you claim to be. That's all.
I like it. Wrapping up today, I know a lot of people started joining, following us on Facebook, and we're starting to get a lot of traction on some of these videos, and the Apple podcast and the Spotify, starting to see a lot of people watching or listening. Ask that you
Millions.
just continue to share it, and you share it with one person. If everybody does, then more people will hear. If Please give us feedback. If you can comment on any of the videos, or you can email us. It's faithintoactionpodcast@gmail.com. Email us any thoughts, any feedback of correction on what we're saying, or questions you would love to see us get into and talk about. We would enjoy that. We would enjoy.
We're not here to be necessarily. We don't want to be incorrect. We don't want to say anything especially heretical, but we're just two guys trying to share our hearts. We hope, and we just hope that you see that. We're not tech pros. We're not theologians. We just know how far God has brought each of us out of our darknesses,
Right.
and just trying to share honest, vulnerable perspective on Jesus and the Bible.
And if you are a tech pro, then we could probably use your help. So reach out.
Yeah, we are hiring for zero pay a tech person,
an unpaid internship. That's what we'll call it.
But if we can ask you to only expect from us honesty and vulnerability, we can give you that for
Right.
sure. All the bells and whistles, that's not where we're at. That's not where either of us want to be. We just want to offer what we believe to be good biblical truth, and be vulnerable with our experiences.
And none of this is scripted. We just vaguely come up with what we're going to talk about, probably like one or two sentences in a text typically, and this is just very unscripted. So if you want to have or input into the conversation, just throw it at us, and we will have open conversation, and we may answer your question. I'm going to honestly say there's times we may not answer your question, because we may have alternate views, but you get to hear two different perspectives, and two guys just talking about Jesus and what we understand from the Bible. All right, I appreciate y'all joining us this week. God bless you. We hope you have a great week, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Be bold.
Be bold. I like that.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you got something out of this message for your spiritual growth. If you enjoyed the message, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, and leave comments. Be sure to follow us on social media, on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram by searching Faith into Action Podcast. You can now find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube. Be sure to follow and click the little bell for notifications so you will know when new episodes are available. Please send us feedback and inspire conversation with questions and input by emailing us at faithintoactionpodcast@gmail.com. If God leads you, please share this episode through any digital media outlet you please. We appreciate your support and input. We hope you have a great week. See you next week. God bless and be bold.